Hey, everybody. As recruiters, we all know that hiring can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business. Whether you're a startup looking to build a dream team or a well established company aiming to streamline your recruitment process, the right tools make all the difference. Teamtailor is powerful all in one recruitment software your candidates and team will love. It's not just a piece of software, it's a way of working. With Teamtailor, you get everything you need in one place: powerful analytics, an AI assistant, customizable workflows, powerful integrations, and more. Plus, Teamtailor is easy to use and implement. You can onboard hiring managers with minimal training and get started right away thanks to an easy implementation and an intuitive, user friendly interface. 94% of users report better team collaboration, and 97% see an increase in qualified candidates. 89% of customers say their hiring process is faster. And if you're focused on the candidate experience, Teamtailor's candidate experience is at the heart of the ATS. Just ask any of the 4 million candidates who connect with customers every month. Join the ranks of over 125,000 recruiters and more than 8,500 companies like Oatly, Porsche, OneFlow, and Solo Stove who have transformed their recruitment with Teamtailor. Discover the new way to attract and hire top talent and see the results for yourself. Hi, and welcome to Revel TA, brought to you by Prospectus Labs, where we talk with people and talent leaders in tech companies. Our mission is to empower the candidate-employer relationship in the future of work. You're tuned in with Lou Adler. Lou is a leader in the performance-based hiring space. He has been in recruiting for his entire career, focusing on things like quality of hire, performance-based job descriptions, and has been instrumental in leading the charge forward for progressive people operations. Lou, it's great to have you.
Hey, Brandon, thank you very much for inviting me. Excited to be with you today.
Awesome. Where are you based and what are you working on?
Well, I'm based in Laguna Beach, California, and surprising, I am working on trying to use predictive analytics, machine learning, generative AI, A versus B testing, statistics to actually accurately predict on the job performance. So that's my current project, which is pretty exciting, actually, because I think it actually can be done now with a
That's
couple of
incredible.
caveats. So
I think we could probably dive in on some of the caveats, but before we go there, you say it can be done now. Your influence in the industry is unmatched. So when did you start having these theses around predictive analytics and having the technology at our fingertips to predict performance?
that's a huge question. My background is engineering. I then got an MBA and then worked in business process, worked in manufacturing, worked in the dawn of the Six Sigma era, and worked with lots of companies that were doing those things. So I would almost have to say forever. Uh, and as I interview candidates and talk to people, accountants, engineers, anybody with an analytical background, there are things that are very predictable. Running a manufacturing company, making millions of cars or bolts or systems or anything, or microcircuits, there's a process that goes behind it. Hiring somehow doesn't want to use that process. So the fact that there's no consistent process for hiring and we leave it up to managers to make the decision based on constraints like, I need this person, I don't care, they look good to me, they answered the clever question properly. So so the problem is that there's so many flaws in the hiring process, and it's not a business process. We leave it to chance. So your question is how long? Well, forever. I'd say ever since I've been in hiring, since 1968. I don't think I hired anybody in 1968, but I certainly started interviewing candidates in 1969, and realized it was a bunch of crap. The way most people did it. When I became a recruiter in 1978, I knew it was a bunch of junk. But so I'm sorry for that long answer, but that's the answer.
That's amazing. Obviously, you mentioned 1969. I'm thinking summer of 69, San Francisco. We talk about tech. We work with tech companies.
Not in 1969, you didn't. You weren't. Your parents weren't even born then.
um, let's talk a little bit about some of that San Francisco tech. You're dabbling in some tools. What are you seeing like right now that benefits recruiters, yourself for generative AI or people analytics?
Well, we kind of that's again a huge jump from 1969 to today. If I had to say the fundamental reason why people make bad hiring decisions is that there's really no logical process to do it. I remember being in Microsoft when we started doing our training program, and this is I'm going to say it was a whole office products group, and it was probably 2005, so almost 20 years ago. And it was 30 or 40 people. It was all the people, the marketing people, the engineering people who were involved in office products, the word, all that stuff. And I said to this group of 20 to 30 or more people, how many of you think you're all good interviewers? They all raised their hand. We're perfect. I said, how many of you always agree to the candidate whom you want to hire? Never. So how could that be? How could they all be good but never agree? Because you're putting your own personal bias on what you think is a good person. And everybody has a different definition of a good person. So when you leave it up to that personal system, it's obviously flawed. My philosophy is, and as my first search assignment, is I ask the hiring manager, what does this person need to do to be successful? That's going to be the criteria. It's what success looks like. Build a team of accountants to launch a new international product, build a machine learning product that predicts manufacturing controls and processes and scrap, it's stuff that people need to do. So until everybody agrees to that specification, you're going to leave it to chance and your own subjectivity. And that's where the problem falls apart. So, and I remember, I don't know, I was thinking of this morning on my walk, but one of the early books I read, it had to be in elementary school or junior high, was the Wright brothers building an airplane. Oh, I know what it was. I saw an article in the newspaper today. So it brought me back to this article, and the Wright brothers said, hey, we're not going to build anything until we all agree to the specs. Then I heard Dyson, the guy who did the vacuum cleaner, a month give a talk, and he said, I'm willing to try everything dozens of times, but I have a spec to what I'm going to build, and we build it and we see if it works or doesn't work, and then we improve it. So this article I read this morning that brought that back was somebody just gave $100 million to Caltech and JPL for adding risk to the engineering process and using a SpaceX methodology of, hey, let's build it right, and what's flawed, we'll keep on improving it. And even Einstein did that when he did the light bulb. So you got a process, you start it, and you keep on improving it. Well, HR, they never start with anything. They just kind of start doing it, and they let it keep undone, and then they try to do it more efficiently. So you look at all of the things that happen in HR in the last 25 years with ATSs and technology, the focus has been on being more efficient, doing the wrong stuff. Let me just leave it at that. I mean, we can open that up and unpack that comment, but you look at the parallels of how manufacturing processes have improved, how AI has been put in, how all this stuff, there's a sequence of steps that have taken place since the dawn of time, since the wheel was invented. HR ignores those steps. That's my thesis. And why we're not getting any better. I think general AI makes it better because in some way I think we're going to take the decision away from the individual hiring manager. It's not your decision, it's the group decision, it's the system decision. And maybe that is the right way to do it. It's not your decision to make the call. You have a vote on the thing, but the whole system will make the call. I don't know if that would ever work, but it seems worth trying.
I like that idea of building consensus around a decision. The way you described building a structured interview process is a lot like building a product. And if recruiting teams can think like product teams and make recommendations and build consensus with stakeholders around the decision, it's going to result in a better quality of hire since each person's vote matters. You've talked a lot about quality of hire. We talked in the past about the simplification of quality of hire. So if you remove the decision-making process from the hiring manager, but it's a group consensus, a voting system, it requires tremendous self-awareness in the business group the recruiting team is supporting. If you're saying to a hiring manager, Lou, I recognize that you're going to be the personal manager of this individual. The average tenure at our company is 6 years. You're at 4.5 years. If we look at the data, you will likely churn before this employee churns. We want to make the most informed decision that is best for our business. That's a lot of humility to break down the ego that hiring managers often have when working with recruiters. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you build consensus and how you see moving to a model where different stakeholder votes count in the decision and how that impacts post-hire outcomes?
Well, I think when you look at the actual decision-making process of should I hire or not hire a person, particularly a stranger. If you have an acquaintance, so let's assume you and I worked together for 3 or 4 years, you worked on a project, I moved to a different company, say, Brandon, why don't you handle this? I know you can handle it. I know a lot about you that I wouldn't know about you if I never met you and work with you. So when you hire a stranger, the risk is high. And it's always easier to say no than yes. So I mean, that decision, I don't like this, I don't know enough about the person. So the idea is you've got to change the decision criteria. And that's why our focus is, no, you have to define the actual work you want done in the actual environment. So it's not just consensus. No, consensus is here's the job. Brandon's going to lead a new product launch. He's going to have 3 analysts working for him. He's going to have this kind of a budget, and he's going to be pretty much independent without a lot of coaching and support. Can he do that job? We break it down in a sequence of performance objectives, and we look at the skills needed to do it, the intellect needed to do it, the experience needed to do it, the past performance, and the situation. Can Brandon manage 3 people in this environment with no direction and a budget of $1.2 million, which includes X, Y, and Z? So you kind of create a specification for the job, not just the person. It's the job itself and the circumstances, both of those. Now, when you interview the candidate, I don't let anybody, when I can pull it off, have a full yes/no vote. And I remember talking with, it was I think the #1 executive of the year. He worked at a bank. I won't get his name in because it was 20 years ago. The guy was brilliant. He said, Lou, I really like your performance-based hiring methodology. I want to give a few of my people an opportunity to meet, and it was a VPHR spot. But I don't want to give them a full vote. I don't want them. I said, so why don't we just let them evaluate a subset of the whole hiring process? Like, can this person implement a system? Can this person build a team like this? That's all they're going to focus on. So then we get to the debriefing session. We shared that evidence. Now that was phenomenal when you think about it. No one they felt obligated to interview the candidate, but they didn't have the burden of saying yes or no. Because a yes is harder than it is hard. If I vote yes, that guy can be dinged if the person screws up. So I'd rather, if I have any doubt at all, I'm going to vote no. Nobody's going to know I'm wrong or right. So that bringing that evidence together was critical around the factors that actually drive success. Now you look at from a business process standpoint, I'm getting a bit techie here, but this is a critical point. I've been in so many debriefing sessions where I can hear a person say, I really like this person because of this. And I don't like the person, somebody else saying, I don't like the person because of that. And when you listen to it, when there's a widespread on these variances, it's just like a manufacturing. When you're looking at parts being built, there's a widespread on the statistical process control chart. There's a flaw with the process. It's usually within a variance of a certain narrow spec. So the idea, while I say that the system has to make the decision, there's a lot involved in that system and in the design of that system to make it work. Now I go back to today as predictive AI and machine learning allows you to control those steps in the process so they're in some way invisible. So the hiring manager who's got to manage this person, now go to your point about churn and longevity, the system made the decision. The candidate, the hiring manager is only responsible for getting that person onboarded and manage that properly. And that now that's a little bit different, but it takes the risk out of the hiring manager in doing it. And I'm not sure that's exactly the total way to do it. I just think that, hey, that's an interesting concept, at least to try out. Sorry for that long-winded answer, but we're designing this system on the fly, really, real time right now, 11:22 California time on March 21st, 2024.
It's a great system. And I think in teams that have a really strong bond and a low ego, and they're delivering exponential results for the growth of their company, they can adopt this model. They can leverage the performance based job description. They can leverage the recruiting competency model. Some of the core tenets to hiring with your head or hire with your head and your methodologies for folks that may be listening that aren't quite this far in the weeds yet. Maybe they're not familiar with hire with your head. Maybe they're not familiar with performance based job descriptions and that competency framework. Can we zoom out a little bit and can you break down like those 4 steps of performance based hiring a little bit in the work that you've published on?
Well, let me kind of give a story, which will be a way to understand at least components of the model. And I'm going to go back to my first search assignment, which was in 1978. But in 1978, I had already been in industry 10 years. And the day before I became a recruiter, I was running a factory with 300 people in a business. I only left that, and I was on a good track because I didn't like the group president. He and I just clashed every time I saw him. And I just said, I quit. I don't want you around my company. You leave me alone and I'll do well, but you come here and I quit. And he pretty much, that happened every time he showed up. His boss, the CEO of the company, tried to always bring me back, and I can't deal with this person. I just don't like him, and I don't want him bugging me. And my performance in the plant was fine. So it was just this challenge that I just didn't like the way he was working. So now I'm going back 40 plus years, and I'm still pissed off. But so when I became a recruiter, I had a basis of understanding what performance in a manufacturing or business environment looked like. So my first assignment, president of a company, and I had worked a couple months to get a bunch of assignments the day I started. I knew I didn't just start total cold. So 2 days later, I was out at the plant. CEO or the president of the company wanted to turn the plant around, had the traditional list of skills, experience, and competencies. And I looked at him and said, Mike, this is not a job description. This is a person description. Let's define the work is a job description. Why would you include, and I didn't know anything about it. I just, why would you put this stuff in? Of course I need a degree, but I don't know how much, 5 years, 10, I got to be able to do the work. What's the work? So we went out in the plant, we found 6 or 7 things that would turn the plant around. And it covered everything from how machines were being run, how the labor was being allocated, how the process and how scrap was controlled. I mean, everything about the plant was assessed in about an hour and a half in terms of what was wrong. So I don't want to say we had the solution. We just knew what was wrong. And the person coming in had to fix them. So I found somebody who could fix them. I've been probably involved in well over 1,000 projects like that. I mean, at least defining the work. Never define the skills and experience. Always define the work. I have to have good communication skills. Well, then what does that look like on the job? Well, they got to talk to executives once a quarter to put a plan together. Fine. Got to be results oriented. Where they got to be results oriented? Well, they got to really make sure that the factory is never shut down or have a scrap that's over 5%. Okay, we put everything in terms of performance objectives. That's the key. During the interview, I assume you were this plant manager. Hey, Brandon, we got to turn this plant around in 6 months to a year. Walk me through wherever you've done something like that in a plant similar to this, the best thing you've ever done like that, and I'll spend 15 minutes on it. Hey, you got to build a team of manufacturing engineers and process control people and maintenance people to pull it off. Walk me through where you've done that. So we just dig into the candidate's accomplishments related to that work. And we see how recent it is, how motivated you are. Now we look at a trend of accomplishments over time, but that's at the core of the performance-based interview and the performance-based job description. With the other components of our process is how do you find candidates, how do you close the deal, how do you represent the job as a career move. But those are the linchpins of the process.
It's awesome. And I love the presence of logic and applying critical thinking skills and using our human-powered cognitive skills. I think recruiters can be a tremendous asset and business partner to the business from an operations level. And what you're describing is leveraging logic and our own reasoning and applying that to how we think about talent. When you talk about quality of hire, you told me the anecdote of a guarantee if you were able to own the process from start to finish, that you'd give a 1-year guarantee. When I think about quality of hire, there's a lot of noise and a lot of publishing around quality of hire as a metric from vendors, from founders, from other TA and recruiting practitioners. Is quality of hire a philosophy, or is it a metric that can be quantified like net recurring revenue or the net promoter score or EBITDA?
Well, so let me kind of just, if you have a candidate there and you've worked with this person a year, you can say, is this a good person? And you say, why? I mean, you can go through because they met their numbers, they built the team, they did what they're supposed to do, they're hardworking, I could trust them. So there's a bunch of factors you could, once you've hired a person. The problem is most people don't look at those things before they hire the person. Got 10 years experience, got this, and they go to the OD people in the company and say, statistically valid that this would predict it. 5 years experience and this kind of background would predict it. I like people to answer this question. So the stuff that people use to predict quality of hire after the person's hired is statistically valid. It's an indirect method. My approach is, I didn't know any better. Hey, here's the work. You got to turn around the plant. And I assess that, and you have to, the plan is this kind of plant. Now, there's certain skills you need to do. Did Brandon turn around the plant? Was the plant comparable to the situation? Were the resources comparable? Was the pace comparable? Was the methodology of getting approval for all these initiatives comparable? I mean, there's a lot of stuff to it, but I've already assessed. I'm actually conducting a pre-hire performance review, doing the work you got to do. So I said, if this is the work, so it's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty close. And part of it is, hey, has Brandon been able to work with a manager like this? No, Brandon can work with managers that are tough-minded and hands-off. And he can also work in an environment where he's got a lot of budget or a little budget. On the other hand, this other candidate, Mary, has to work in this kind of environment and that kind of environment. So there are things you can factor if you look at, hey, this candidate's got to do this work and it's got to be successful at least over the course of a year. So you just got to kind of look at, I don't want to say it's simple. Well, actually, it seems simple to me. The problem is when people do it. This is when the anecdote I gave, it worked for me. I was probably one of the first, and at the time as a contingency recruiter, I gave the first 1-year guarantee. But I told clients, you had to do it my way. You had to define work this way. You had to interview this way. You're only going to see, if I'm going to send you 2 candidates, and if one of them isn't good enough to become a finalist or go forward, we're probably going to stop. We're going to figure out why. It's either you or me, and it's probably you, not me. Now, that's Siri talking about it. Siri, I'm not talking to you. I don't know why she's. Okay. No, she's talking. Well, whatever. Somebody's in the background, but it's definitely Siri. So the idea. Now that's a pretty arrogant, in-your-face idea, but I was confident that I knew what I was doing. I knew the work. And that's the problem when I see recruiters. If you don't know the job at some level, and I didn't know it as well as the hiring manager, but I knew it. And most hiring managers aren't going to clarify expectations up front. But if I forced them to do it, I had confidence talking to candidates. I had confidence talking to him. I knew how to interview a candidate, but we were interviewing around the specifications of the job. Not some feeling, is this person a good person, aggressive enough, of good first impression? No, can a person do the work? I mean, if you couldn't do the work, don't fine. And I remember talking with the CFO of a major company in Southern California, pain in the neck guy. And it was a director of cost accounting. And it was a big medical company that had plants around the world. And everybody loved this candidate. The CFO, and I had never met the CFO before. 10-minute interview, didn't like the candidate. Said it was too soft. Well, I finally talked to the CFO and said, are you aware that this candidate because of being quiet, actually implemented that same SAP ERP system at another major corporation that was union, was a tougher environment than you had. And it was because of that he was successful. When I really pushed back on the CFO, who was an in-your-face guy, I mean, I'm from the Bronx and worked in manufacturing, so we kind of got along. When he met the candidate, he spent 2 hours, he whiteboarded the whole product on the phone, the whole plan for the next 2 years. The guy's brilliant. Never met a guy better than this. And it was because I pushed back on him making a judgment about first impression. And this is where, I'm sorry for this long-winded story, but this is where emotions control. And if the recruiter isn't orchestrating the process, it's going to fall apart. So now I go back to the 1 year guarantee. You had to do it my way, and I had to have a vote. And they didn't like the idea of, you don't get a vote. It's not your guy. Yeah, it is my guy. I'm putting a year behind it. I got to redo this over, give you the money back. So I do get a vote. So, well, we don't need to give you a vote. Okay, you get 90 days. Okay, we'll give you a vote. I mean, it was a negotiation, but when I sat people in a panel, and this is where I really learned how the process worked. When you have a panel interview, people sharing evidence, that's where the truth comes out. So panel interviews and formal debriefing sessions are phenomenal. Without those two, the process kind of falls apart. Now, can AI minimize that? That to me was what a game changer. And I had a lot of clients where I didn't like the panel interview until I started doing it and realized how it was powerful. And a very formal debriefing session where you shared evidence. And it was quickly, the thumbs got voted down. You could just see a big thumb was pretty much useless.
That's key. Those debrief sessions, getting them on the calendar. You packed a lot in there. We could pull so many threads. Early in my career, a manager told me to be successful in recruiting, you got to have thick skin and a bright smile. And you talk about going toe to toe with the hiring manager as a contingent recruiter trying to win business. I think recruiting looks different whether you're a contingent agency or if you're an in-house recruiter working as part of a team. Can you talk more about the ability to manage stakeholders through your recruiter competency model and how recruiters can learn to develop that skill to push back on hiring managers and ask them to take a second look and extract some of those case studies from past behavior, which predicts future performance?
Well, two things. If you don't have the evidence, it doesn't work. And the evidence, so let me just talk about this one guy who's director of cost. I thought he was too quiet too when I met him. This guy's so soft, quiet. But he was certainly smart. But then I said, tell me about something you accomplished where you launched a project like that. And he told me it was a big automotive company. It was one of the first SAP ERP systems that are being implemented worldwide. He told me how he worked with the union. He told me the challenges he faced. He told me the budget. He told me who he worked with. He told me how he got the plant managers and the head of the union together and it was a whole new way of costing and tracking costs and labor performance. And I mean, it was a complicated deal. I probably spent almost a half hour on that one project. So now, 2 weeks later, the CFO says he couldn't do the project. So I had a number one, I was confident that he could. I pushed back and gave the story. So I had to do two. I had to push back and I had to give the story. I wouldn't have had the guts. I mean, I'm ballsy, but I wouldn't have, if I didn't have the story, I couldn't have. It had to be both those conditions. So, but if I didn't know the job and I didn't have that example, it would have fallen apart. So, and this is where now, so that's at the micro level, that's the concept. But from a practical standpoint, as a recruiter, an outside recruiter, I never worked more than 4 to 6 assignments at any one time, ever. When I became a retained recruiter, it was probably 2 or 3. So I had the time to do that. If you're a in-house corporate recruiter working 10 to 15 assignments, how can you do that? I mean, so that's the real, and that's a real problem. When you work in 20 search assignments, you got all these managers, all you can do is push the paper and hopefully GAI can help you do some of that things, at least be more productive. So now you look at an ATS design or design with the real world is they got to fill a lot of spots and they don't have enough resources to do it. Well, so then they say, hey, I love your stuff, Lou, but I don't have time to do it. And I can appreciate that. And it is the reality of rubber hits the road. But on the other hand, I don't think back in the days when companies saying we're bringing in ATS systems, we're bringing in-house recruiting systems, the goal was to minimize search fees. That was, if you go back 25 years, let's forget, we're going to save millions of dollars in search fees. They didn't save a single dime. Search firms grew exponentially. RPOs grew exponentially in-house. So you look at the cost of hiring per person, it hasn't changed at all. And the quality is now you've turned jobs and or careers into gigs, and you got more turnover, more dissatisfaction. And so you look at all the macro metrics, things haven't gotten any better. It's just more expensive. And then we keep on, and I talk to ATS vendors, they're trying to be more efficient. They don't want to be better. Their goal, because their clients, the HR leaders, are focusing on efficiency, not on improving quality of hire. So there's some big systemic and strategic issues that are overlaying all of these trends we have in the HR community. And so I look at it and say, I'm an old guy here, and I don't know if they'll ever be solved, but it's still fun trying sometimes.
I agree with all that. Like, there's a lot of ways to make a living, and like this should be fun. Recruiting should be fun. If you're in recruiting, whether you're an agency or in house, like I fundamentally believe that is an optimism. We should be having some fun because this involves people getting a new job and advancing their financial security, their personal and professional fulfillment. You think about like those big spikes in our life, and it's the impact we make and the people we work with. So 100% agree with that last point about having fun. And in terms of connecting that consensus building around how and who hires and makes the final decision, linking that to quality of hire, do you think that checks out based on what you're seeing now? If you turn that decision-making process into a group vote, we'll see better quality of hire.
First off, you have to have a model for what does it look like. What does I happen to have a talent scorecard that ties to this formula, which says ability to do the work in relationship to fit drives motivation. And because motivation is the driver of success, it's raised to the power of n or 2. It's got to be squared. It doesn't matter. It's a variable. Really, the reality of it is you can be perfectly competent, technically competent, managerially competent, interpersonally competent. But if the job, you're not happy with the job, you won't do a very good job. So you got to measure that ability of that person under soft and hard skills. Can that person capable to do that work? But now that the fit factors tie in, fit with the manager, fit with the culture, fit with the job itself. Do you want to do this work in those circumstances? And so we actually have a quality of hire talent scorecard that addresses that. And I work with a PhD at Harvard who kind of was blown away when he saw, of course, it's the fit factors. And that doesn't matter. We don't have to get into the details yet. But now getting people to get those variables into that scorecard is critical. This is where you have the debriefing session. You have it. And I think when people, and I've been in debriefing sessions where I don't like that person. And then somebody else says, well, are you aware this person did this and this? Oh, I didn't ask that question. So all of a sudden you're sharing evidence in this debriefing session. Yeah, that person from unqualified is, I'd have to say, definitely qualified. I can be wrote in favor. So you see when evidence is shared in these debriefing sessions, minds change. And it's because that person I had, not me, but let's assume one interviewer was totally responsible for this person building and managing a team. Well, everyone else is kind of asking generic questions. Oh, wow, that person really can build and manage a team. Oh, that person can really go head to head with operations people and union people. And you're working on an accounting spot. You're dealing with major unions that are going to change how they get paid, how the union law is going, or the union agreement's going to be rewritten, and you're dealing with plant managers that get stuff out the door. And you got this soft-spoken guy who's working with all these people. That's a tough job. But you hear the guy talk about how he did it. It blows you away. So I'm just saying, when you're in that formal debriefing session with evidence, you can pull it together.
Yeah.
It's hard, man. Companies don't want to do it. Let's just go around. Brandon, what do you think of that? Mary, what do you think of Bill? What do you think? I mean, it's usually a very informal kind of debriefing. Should we go or no go? And unless the candidate's perfect, most people will vote no. Again,
very simple
I'm kind of giving the real world of the variables, but that's what happens.
It's so true. And I'd love to take it there from a very real world tactical. What does it look like to recruit? What do those sessions look like? Because a simple exercise is just adding up the average salary of somebody in an interview process, multiplying it by the number of interviews it takes to fill a role, and calculating your cost of the interview process. How many times does a interviewer or a hiring manager blow off that debrief or deprioritize that decision or say, oh, my notes are in the scorecard? If we're investing thousands of dollars in the interview process itself, let alone that 20% contingency fee or that 10K a month salary for the in-house recruiter, shouldn't we all agree as a consensus that a 30-minute meeting for us to debrief is well worth the investment if we're focused on something like quality of hire?
Yeah, it's the fact that you have to ask that question makes is almost endemic to what the problem is. The fact is we don't
And
take the hiring decision seriously. So you look at 100 or 10K amount. Let's assume you're going to hire someone for a software job, product manager, sales job. If you look at the impact that that person can have on the business, even simply, we're talking about 2 to 3 times a person's salary, at least. Revenue per employee. It doesn't matter. So you're spending $250,000 for a staff level person, $500,000 for a manager. You're paying. That's what you now. If your CFO says you have to submit some kind of capital appropriation request for $500,000, it's going to take you an hour to 2 hours or 3 hours or more to pull it together. But for hiring, we can spend $500,000 without thinking. Yes, no, even not going forward. So yeah, you look at the superficiality of the hiring decision, despite the fact we have behavioral interview, we have all these OD people, the decision to make the hiring decision is still left to chance in many ways. Flip a coin, do I like the person? Did I have a good day? I knew that when I interviewed a candidate in the morning, I was much better than interviewing a candidate in the afternoon. Afternoon, I didn't care. Screw it. I was tired, didn't want to do it. Morning, man, you got a good interview. And if you were a candidate of mine, you knew, boy, that was a tough interview. I liked it, fair but tough. You go to the afternoon, what was all that all about? I was tired, wanted to go home, But you think about all managers, that's impactful. I mean, I remember reading some article that judges were the same way. You get in front of a judge in the morning, you're probably going to get a different outcome than if you meet for the same exact trial in the afternoon. It's just kind of interesting. So there's so many variables that go on that are hard to control. But the bottom line is there's no business process for hiring. There's no deliberation. There's no approach to let's do it the right way.
Hot off the press, hiring hacks with Lou Adler. Book your interviews in the morning. Candidates, book your interviews in the morning. Let's recognize our biases. I think it takes tremendous self-awareness to recognize that fundamental human element. So maybe that is a good idea. Maybe recruiting teams shouldn't interview in the afternoon. I joke with friends, sometimes recruiting is like an end of day function. You get the update from the hiring manager at like the second or third final hour in the day. It takes a great hiring manager that's real committed to hit you back on Slack first thing in the morning about hiring. They've got their business priorities. I think being a great recruiter is establishing a presence, building that rapport and the relationship so you get those messages first thing and start your day off right. So I'm with you. Let's do interviews in the morning from now on. So Lou, what is some advice that you have for recruiting teams that are looking to focus on performance-based hiring, quality of hire at this moment in time?
Well, let me make the general statement. And so I'll look at this if I'm talking to a recruiter, and I'll ask this generic question. How do you, as a recruiter, feel when you're dealing with a sales rep who doesn't know the product? They're just trying to hustle you for the sale. And most recruiters would say, I feel uncomfortable, I want to hang up, yada, yada, yada. I said, well, how do you think a candidate feels when you don't know the job? And they say, tell me a little bit about the job. And you give a bunch of BS and awesome and all this stuff and vague. Well, the only people who are going to care are those who are desperate and are willing to take an ill-defined lateral transfer. But a good person who is a top person, top performer, isn't going to be interested in you as a person or want to deal with you or give you a referral if you don't know the job. So the advice I give to recruiters, you have to know the job. And what I ask hiring managers is, what does this person need to do to be successful? And I will find candidates who can do that work. Give me a little relief on this years of skills, experience, and competencies. That's how you open up the talent pool to more people and raise the quality of hire. Even if you don't measure it perfectly, at least you can understand it to some degree and measure it properly. And I think that's really the fundamental key that I would say that gets you in the game. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. So knowing the job is the key, and that gives you the confidence to do everything else. Without knowing the job, it's a bunch of hokum, and you're pushing on a cloud and thinking you're busy and not making progress. But you got to know the job. That starts the game.
Such great advice, Lou. We'll have to chat another time around interview methodology, behavioral interview questioning, people analytics, and the work that you're doing with the PhD researcher from Harvard. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the Rebel TA podcast. How can people stay in touch with what you're publishing and learn more about the spaces you're occupying?
Well, I would just go to performancebasedhiring.com and you'll see the sign up. You can go info@performancebasedhiring.com. But performancebasedhiring.com, you can join the newsletter. And to me, that's the best way to do it. Or join one of the newsletters I have on LinkedIn, and that would be fine.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining on the Rebel TA podcast, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Rebel TA podcast. If you're a talent acquisition leader or a recruiter looking for a conference to attend in 2024, I'm here to tell you that RecFest is the world's largest talent acquisition conference. RecFest USA returns to Nashville, Tennessee on September 12th and 13th, 2024, and I am stoked. This is not your average conference. Shout out to Jamie Leonard and the entire crew over at RecFest who produce an incredible event. Tickets are on sale now. Don't sleep. I'll see you in Nashville.